Welcome to Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. Want to connect with Howie? Email him at howie@israelnewstalkradio.com. Now here's your host, Howie Silbiger.
And welcome to Political Hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. My name is Howie Silbiger. I know it's been a while. I've been having problems with my voice. You can probably hear it in my voice right now. But enough about me. Let's get to the show. The idea that America brokered the Middle East ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel is absolutely ridiculous in my mind. America never really understood Middle Eastern politics. They never understood the Arab view of the Middle East, and they never really accepted the fact that the Middle East conflict, the conflict between Israel and its Arab Islamic neighbors, has nothing to do with land and is a religious conflict. So because people are refusing to accept that it is a religious conflict, we run into the issue of them thinking that a negotiated agreement between two countries or between a country and a terror group is going to resolve the entire Middle East conflict. So Hamas agreed to the ceasefire only to rearm and reassemble themselves to lick their wounds and then to attack Israel again, as we saw 2 days after the agreement was signed. Hamas attacked Israel again. So deals with Hamas are never really deals with Hamas. They're never really deals for a ceasefire. And ceasefires in the Middle East don't tend to work when it comes to Israel. Now, the reason behind that is quite simple, and nobody seems to want to pay attention to the fact that the Islamic law states that any land that is under a caliphate ever in history, which Israel was with the Ottoman Empire, could never, ever be ruled by anybody else. It has to be an Islamic government, and any other government on there is considered an infidel and has to be destroyed. So once you understand that concept, once you understand that no matter how hard you negotiate, no matter how much land that you give up, no matter how many states of Palestine you create, you will never, ever resolve the issue as long as a Jewish state exists on that land. Because for Islamists and people who follow radical Islam, it is unacceptable to have anything but an Islamic state on that land. So you could negotiate all you want. You could meet. You could waste billions of dollars negotiating, but you're going to find that it's always going to devolve into war again. And chances are, even though Israel doesn't start these conflicts, Israel will be blamed by the world for the conflict. This is a given, and this is exactly what has happened. Hamas attacked. They broke the ceasefire. Israel retaliated, saying, hey, if the ceasefire is broken, we're going to continue our campaign to destroy Hamas. And yet the world condemned Israel, and nobody said a word about Hamas. This is the way the world works. As long as the Jews involved, it's news. And as long as Israel's involved, it's condemnable. But there is an icing on the cake. It's an unfortunate icing, and we don't often see this happen. A negotiated agreement to release the hostages in Munich during the Munich Olympics resulted in the hostages being killed at the airport. In this case here, the hostages were killed over 2 years, but whatever remaining hostages were alive for whatever reason, they were returned to Israel alive, and you don't often see that with Hamas. Although you see it sporadically. But what a price Israel has to pay. What a price. So we already saw that releasing terrorists for hostages is a bad idea. When the idea first came to Israel, not for this case, but in previous cases, and in the first times that they started negotiating with terrorists, Israel's policy was always, we don't negotiate with terrorists. But when they finally decided to negotiate with terrorists, the Israeli leaders that did the negotiations realized, they knew at the time, that they were bowing to the pressure of the population, bowing to the pressure of the families of the people who were being held hostage, who rightfully were pressuring their government to get their people back. I mean, everybody wanted their people back. Why would you want your loved ones to be hostage? And so they pressured the government. The government bowed to the pressure. But bowing to that pressure, the Israeli government knew at the time, I can guarantee that they knew at the time, that they were showing a weakness, that they were giving the green light to terror groups to take hostages, to kidnap people off the street, hold them hostage, demand something like the release of terrorists from Israeli prisons, and receive it because Israel values life over death. Israel will do anything possible as a moralistic country, as a country that cares about its citizens and cares about life, will do anything in their power to save lives, to minimize civilian casualties, to minimize the death of political prisoners. And so the Arabs, understanding that they love death because their dead become martyrs, so they strive to die. It's a death cult. And they understand that their death cult is the exact polar opposite of Israel's living cult. Israel wants to survive. Israel wants to live. They want to live in peace. They want to live in harmony with their neighbors. They don't want this kind of problem. So understanding that the death cult, understanding that the living cult wants to stay alive, knows that if they kidnap people and they hold them hostage, that the living cult, that Israel, will do whatever they have to do in order to get those hostages back. Whether it's level Gaza, whether it's negotiate and release terrorists with blood on their hands, they'll do it. Now, I've spoken about this before in the show, and I'll talk about it again and again and again, because during the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange, where Gilad Shalit was exchanged for thousands of terrorists that were held by Israel, the terrorist that killed a cousin of mine was released. And he was released and put back into the civilian population, and now he serves as the mayor of Hebron. And he boasts on his Facebook page about his murders, about the murdered Jews the murders of Jews that he's committed. So being a murderer, a convicted murderer, and murdering Jews could still get you elected the mayor of a town, because it's not looked badly upon you that you killed Jewish people. In fact, it's something you strive to do. Just think about the young man who, on October 7th, called his parents from the cell phone of one of the people he killed on October 7th and boasted to them, "Hey, Ma, hey, Dad, look, I killed 12 Jews with my own hands." He was proud of himself. Fortunately, that monster was taken out by an Israeli airstrike not long ago. But if we continue to ask ourselves how we allow civilized society to accept that these people, and I use the term people very loosely, I don't really consider them people, because people, let me explain that before someone starts calling me racist or Islamophobic. Ooh, because you said something and you're Islamophobic. Let me try to explain this. I don't consider anybody who could take a life or multiple lives, who could burn babies alive, who could cut heads off people, who could rape women and then kill them. And I want you to notice that none of the living hostages were women. And the reason for that is that the women couldn't tell the stories of what happened to them while they were hostage. And when you think about these monsters that could do these horrific things to people, you wonder, are they even people? They're not people. There was a video that was released not long ago, and I saw the video years ago. It was part of the hour-long video that the Israeli government put together of the massacre of Jews on October 7th and showed to journalists and politicians. I was unfortunately one of the journalists that saw that video, and now the footage for that video is being slowly released to the public. And it's horrific. It leaves an inedible scar on your indelible scar on your brain, on your soul, when you watch innocent people being slaughtered. And it really clarifies who the good guys and who the bad guys are. Who are the good guys and who are the evil people. And the one video that was released to the public just not long ago was a video of a man and his two sons, and they were literally yanked out of bed, all of them in their underwear, and they went running to the bomb shelter. And then you see a terrorist break into their home. It's October 7th. You see a terrorist break into their home, and he throws a grenade into the bomb shelter. And it blows up, and you see the father lying there dead. And the two boys come out of the bomb shelter and go into the main room, into the living room or kitchen area, and they're sitting down. And one boy's talking to the other, and he says to the boy, "Are you okay?" And the boy says, "I can't see out of one of my eyes." And the other boy says, "Yeah, you're bleeding. It doesn't look like your eyes there anymore." And they're having this long conversation while the terrorist who just killed their father is standing right in front of them, rummaging through the fridge looking for something to eat. As if murdering two young boys, these boys were 10 and 12, murdering two young boys' fathers, their father, meant nothing. It was just part of the day's work. I had a job to do. I came, I did my job. Now I'm leaving. That's what it looked like. And he even spoke to them. He was having a conversation with them, asking them questions about the food and asking them questions about. It was just a sickening video, and you wonder how these people or these monsters that came from Gaza. I call them. Sometimes I slip. I don't mean to call them people. It's an insult to people. How these monsters that came from Gaza, and I'm insulting monsters now, but I don't think the monsters are going to get too insulted. How these monsters that came from Gaza, who have kids of their own, could do that to children. There was another video that hasn't been released publicly that was part of this journalist video that we saw, which showed a Hamas monster murdering a baby and then cutting its head off. Once you watch somebody do that and you realize it's not special effects, it's not a movie, it's not a joke, it actually happened, then your empathy for Hamas and your empathy for this whole cause of a Palestinian state just dissipates. It just disappears. I understand why the Israelis are so hard when it comes to giving up land. They fought very hard for the land. Jewish blood has flowed in the land of Israel for the land that they live on. Being Jewish and being independent has never been an easy task for any Jew anywhere. But what I don't understand and what I'll never understand is how the world sides with evil each and every time. It is unfathomable for me that good, decent, smart people buy into horrific ideologies and they support them. It doesn't make sense. It's not even logical. And that's the illogical part of the world. And the part of the world that really annoys me and confuses me. We go back to Nazism. I understand how people were brainwashed to understand Nazism, to believe in Nazism. I get it. I get how the Nazi machine and the propaganda machine worked. But normal people who live in society, in a normal society, and Germany was a normal society at the time, before Hitler. So normal people who live in a normal society and are told that their neighbors and their friends are subhuman, for them to buy into that philosophy means that that idea, the nugget of that idea, had to have been planted way before. And when you think about Nazism, that sort of came out of nowhere. They took over in the early 1930s. By 1939, they were murdering people. And the whole country bought into it, and then the whole continent bought into it. So that moved pretty quick, and the propaganda machine and the manipulation of people happened very, very quickly there. The Arabs have had 77 years to train their children, 2 generations, 3 generations now, of children, that the Jews living in the Middle East are evil. They've had They've had 77 years to change their education system or to create an education system that teaches that Jews and Zionists are subhuman. The American people have had 77 years to accept that ideology, to agree with that ideology. And we see it. And we see it consistently with the condemnations of Israel. Every time Israel gets attacked and Israel retaliates in any way, the attacker never gets condemned, but Israel always gets condemned. So it's interesting that Israel gets held to a higher standard than any other country in the world. Imagine if bombs were launched into Texas from Mexico continuously over the course of 20 years. How the Americans would have reacted after the first bomb landed in Mexico. They wouldn't have sat back on their laurels like Israel did and allowed Gaza to launch bombs into Israel for decades, having people in cities in southern Israel running to bomb shelters, and a generation of children, almost 2 generations of children, raised to understand that they have to be 5 seconds away from a bomb shelter. It seems to me that Israel has been extremely lenient with the Hamas, where in 2006 Hamas took over Gaza after Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza. So there were no Jews in Gaza. Every Jewish body, every Jewish house, every Jewish building, every Jewish person, every Jewish fire hydrant was pulled out of that land. The Jews, the Israelis, completely evacuated Gaza. And instead of creating a Palestinian state, which could have been the oasis of the Middle East, instead of creating industry, instead of creating a beautiful place for people to live, they used the former locations of Israeli towns to launch bombs into southern Israel, into the towns of the people who were trying to help them, into the towns of the people who were fighting the Israeli government, trying to convince the Israeli government to be a little more lenient on Gaza, to allow more people into work in Israel, to give some social aid to Gaza, to build hospitals and send doctors. These are the people whose bombs were landing on their heads, and yet they were still willing to help Gazans. There were organizations in southern Israel, in these towns, that were set up to drive sick Gazan people from Gaza to Israeli hospitals. There were doctors in Israeli hospitals that were willing to treat Gazans that were sick and that were injured. And these are the people who were massacred on October 7th, the people who wanted to help, the people who spent and devoted their entire lives to helping the citizens of Gaza. The thanks they got: slaughter on October 7th. So when you think about who they killed, and you think about their motives, so the ones who were caught said that their directives were quite simple: kill as many people as you can, kill, torture, rape as many people as you can in order to demoralize the country. So, understanding that the goal of the terrorists on October 7th was to murder as many Jews as you can on the streets of cities of Israel in order to terrorize the rest of Israel. When you understand that was their goal, not to liberate Palestine, not to overthrow the government, not even to pressure the government to do something, but to kill Jews. That was it. Kill as many as you can. And when you understand that they killed the Jews that were trying to help them, you wonder, did this have anything to do with Israel, or is this just a campaign to kill Jews? This is what you start wondering. Because there was no political goal, there was no political gain for killing Jews on October 7th. There was no political gain at all. It didn't hurt Israel as a country. Well, it hurt them as a country to lose their citizenship. It hurt them as a country because questions still linger on why it took the Israeli army so long to respond, and as to why the government took so long to respond. There's still questions that Bibi Netanyahu has to answer, and he says we'll answer after the Gaza war is over. There are still questions, but putting the questions aside, there was no gain that Gazans would have had by attacking Israel, except for killing Jews. They knew going into Israel, in fact, I think they were surprised that the Israelis didn't react quicker than they did. They knew that Israel was going to react. They were going to react hard. They knew that Israel was going to invade Gaza. This was all pre-knowledge they had. They had to have known, because any political analyst anywhere would have said that, hey, if you are going to attack Israel from Gaza, a physical land attack, and kill 3,000 people, or 50, kill as many people as they killed. It wasn't 3,000, 1,200 people. If you kill people, then people are going to react, and the country is going to react, and the country is going to attack. There was precedent for this. And so Hamas, the leadership of Hamas, knew exactly what they were doing. They were poking the bear, hoping for a reaction. And they got the reaction they were looking for. Israel coming in and attacking, Israel killing the leadership. I'm sure none of the leadership was surprised when a bomb landed on their head. They knew that they were targets. They knew that this was how Israel was going to respond. There was no way they couldn't know. And so we are in a situation where a death cult attacks Israel, kills a large segment of the Israeli population, and then goes back and waits to die because they want to be martyrs. They get their 72 virgins, and they get to spend eternity with Allah as martyrs. And of course, their memory is blessed in crazy land. And so here we are, a ceasefire that's now broken. Israel retaliates and gets condemned. And we are living in a dystopian nightmare. Anti-Jewish sentiment across the world is at an all-time high. Jews are being attacked in the streets in Vienna, in Amsterdam, in Canada, in the United States. Jews that have nothing to do with Israel, children, are being attacked in the street. Is this the end of times? Are we looking at the coming of Messiah? It's quite possible that we are rapidly approaching the coming of Messiah. Or it's quite possible that we are looking at the beginnings, and I really hope this is not the case, but it's very possible it is, that we are looking at the beginnings of the start of another Holocaust that are massacred the Jewish people. Now, I never thought that less than 100 years after a quarter of the Jewish population was killed by the world, that we'd be looking at another situation where maybe it could happen again. We scream never again a lot. I hear never again all the time. But screaming never again must mean never again. We must be aware of what's happening around the world. And when we look at the news of what's happening around the world, it's scary. It is very, very scary. And I think we've come to the time where we have to evaluate whether living in the diaspora, living outside of the state of Israel, is even smart for Jews, or if Jews should reconsider their choices and start deciding to relocate to the Jewish state, the state where they're safe, the state where they're being protected by their own. This is what we have to start considering, because the status quo is not working anymore, and we're at a time in our lives, in the lives of the Jewish people, in the timeline of the Jewish people, where we might be facing another Holocaust. And if that is the case, and it looks like it's heading in that direction, then it's better to get out before than after. Get out while you still can. I hate to be a Debbie Downer, and that's really what I feel like. And but this is the situation the Jewish community is in the diaspora. We can't rely on people to save us. We can't rely on our neighbors. When your neighbor is in the street screaming, "Free Palestine from the river to the sea," which calls for the genocide of the Jews living in Israel, and then is screaming globalized intifada, maybe time to leave. I'm Howie Silberger. I'm sorry this should have been a longer show. I had a lot more to share with you. I will be back again next week. Hopefully, my voice will be stronger and I'll be able to continue longer and cover everything I wanted to cover. But I thank you for listening, and I am happy to be back here on Israel News Talk Radio. I want to thank the management of Israel News Talk Radio for being patient with me. I know that that I have not been on consistently and regularly, and they've kept my slot and they've allowed me to continue doing the show, and I really appreciate the patience that Israel News Talk Radio has had with me. Thank you so much, and I will be back again next week with a new episode of Political Hitman. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you next week. If you want to reach me, by the way, I'm Howie Silberger, and you could email me, howie@israelnewstalkradio.com. Feel free to send me an email. Okay, until next week, have a great one. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.